In Mexico, as part of an annual demonstration, relatives of the 43 Ayotzinapa students marched for justice. In the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice on Friday ordered the Israeli government to take all the preventive measures within its power to prevent the acts of genocide in Gaza. And in France, the main farmers' union won a series of concessions from the government on Friday. Hi, hello from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Caracas, Venezuela. This is From the South, and I'm your anchor, Gladys Casara. Now we begin with the news. The International Court of Justice on Friday ordered the Israeli government to take all measures within its power to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza. In this regard, the United Nations High Court, based in The Hague, issued a verdict after the government of South Africa filed a lawsuit against Israel for genocidal acts in Gaza due to the ongoing offensive that has already killed more than 26,000 people. In turn, the ICJ attorney, Joan Donoghue, and other judges of the Hague Tribunal ruled by 15 votes to 2 that Israel must take measures to prevent the killings of civilians in Gaza and all conditions detrimental to their livelihood that could lead to their partial destruction or prevent births among the Gaza population. In this way, the tribunal will give Benjamin Netanyahu's government 1 month to submit a report on the measures ordered. It should be noted that a final ruling on whether Israel committed genocidal acts could take up to a year or more. In turn, the Hamas group also reiterated that it will abide by any ceasefire ruling as long as Israeli troops reciprocate.
I quote, "Gaza has become a place of death and despair. Families are sleeping."
And the head of the top United Nations court said that Israel must allow humanitarian assistance for Gaza during the reading of the initial decision in the case against Israel over genocide in Gaza.
16 votes to 1. The State of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to ensure the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, on Friday in South Africa, locals hailed the ruling of the highest court of the United Nations, ordering Israel to do everything possible to prevent any act of genocide in Gaza. The International Court of Justice in The Hague issued its verdict in a landmark case brought by Pretoria, also ordering Tel Aviv to allow humanitarian aid access to the Palestinian territory. Also, let us recall that South Africa accused Israel of breaching the 1948 UN Genocide Convention established in the aftermath of World War II.
Perhaps now in this space we're discussing the extent to which it can have an impact. That's something that we're curious to see, especially with what Israel is going to respond with in a month's time as the court has instructed. But I think for now it is a step in the right direction, for sure.
The judges have done the work, they've applied their mind, and it's 15 to 1, 15 to 2, 16 to 1, and it's good for our jurisprudence, and it's good for humanity, and I hope that Israel will respect the judgment and will act accordingly.
In this regard, South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor stated that this is a decisive victory for the international rule of law and an important milestone in the pursuit of justice for the Palestinian people. But she said that the ICJ must issue a ceasefire order.
I believe that in exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work. I would have wanted a ceasefire. No, they didn't.
Are you disappointed
but how,
they didn't specify that?
I have no way that I'm going to say I'm disappointed. I hoped for it, but the fact of delivering humanitarian aid, the fact of taking measures that reduce the levels of harm against persons who have no role in what Israel is combating, for me requires a ceasefire. And I believe Israel would have to attend to how it conducts its search for the hostages and for those Hamas individuals who carried out the October 7 attack.
We have more on the matter. In the last 24 hours, the Israeli occupation forces committed around 18 massacres, killing some 174 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. According to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, the attacks in Tel Aviv in the last hours also left about 310 wounded, most of them women and children. Health authorities warned that ambulance and civil defense teams are unable to reach the places attacked by the occupation, thus hindering rescue and care of the wounded. According to official figures, since the beginning of the Israeli aggression on October the 7th, some 26,000 people have been killed and other 63,740 have been wounded. And now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. We have other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Mexico, relatives of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa Normalista students marched this Friday in the country's capital as part of an annual demonstration to demand justice and the return of their loved ones. The demonstrators demanded the appearance of the youths while carrying signs with photos of the disappeared students and shouting, "We want them alive." They also rejected the release of the 8th military personnel allegedly involved in the case and demanded the punishment of those responsible. Let's remember that in December, the Mexican government expressed that between January the 4th and March the 4th, 2024, it will open to the relatives all the files in possession of the Mexican state of the Ayotzinapa case. And the Supreme Court of Justice of Venezuela announced on Friday the first decisions on the review of political disqualifications. The highest court of justice of Venezuela has so far informed that the citizens Leocenis Garcia, Richard Mardo, and the former governor of the state of Zulia, Pablo Perez, have been qualified to hold public office, while the disqualification of Enrique Capriles Radonsky is maintained. The decisions of the court were announced within the framework of the Barbados Agreement signed between the national government and the United Platform of the Opposition last October. This is the process of dialogue promoted in the city of Bridgetown and in Barbados, and refers to the promotion of political rights and the protection of the vital interests of the nation. During an interview with the president of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, carried out during the Maduro podcast, the leader emphasized that between 2018 and 2020, at least 20 destabilization plans were detected, among them 5 assassination attempts.
We made 20 substantiated complaints of serious acts against the stability of the Republic and the peace of the Republic.
Since you were a minister,
Between 2018, 2019, and 2020.
In 2 years, you filed 20 complaints.
At least 20 claims,
with evidences.
which included attempted magnocide, the frustrated magnocide of August 4, 2018, which included training of mercenaries in paramilitary camps in Colombia, which included psychological warfare operations, which included serious sabotage against the Venezuelan electrical system, attempted assassination of leaders of the Bolivarian Revolution, attempted takeovers of military posts, theft of weapons in military units, attempted coup d'etat of different signs, called Blue Strike, when they wanted to involve deserting officers of the Venezuelan Air Force, because they have also developed a psychological field war on our Bolivarian National Armed Forces, and they have also been defeated. But they always manage to get some traitor in the making, who succumbs to the requests and offers they make, but it is amazing the attempts of magnocide, for example, five known assassination plans.
Discovered, unveiled, and defeated, and cancelled, as people say.
And with confessions of those involved.
During the interview, Jorge Rodriguez and President Nicolás Maduro Moros also highlighted the efforts made by the government of Venezuela to reactivate the Barbados agreements.
The National Assembly presented the agreement, especially the political agreement. The three agreements were presented in plenary session of the National Assembly, and the text of those agreements were approved.
They have constitutional rank at the legislative level of the National Assembly.
They have legal rank. Consequently, they were published in the official gazette with a rank that corresponds to them, according to the Assembly.
It is very important that they were given a higher rank, betting on dialogue, understanding, and respect for the agreements that have strictly respected.
And the plenary session commissioned me to present an appeal before the Constitutional Chamber for that chamber to discuss the constitutionality of the mechanism and those agreements. And in fact, the Constitutional Chamber decided that those agreements were perfectly within the constitutional parameters. That is to say, that the legislative power and the judicial power endorse with their actions of juries.
These Barbados agreements and the established mechanism, all this in a tremendous effort that we have made. I thank you very much, Jorge, for all the effort, the patience you have had to talk with the gringos of the Trump administration and with the gringos of the Biden administration. But above all, the most difficult thing of all, to talk with the extreme right, with that extreme right to whom we opened a door so that they could return to the Constitution, return to the elections, and get out of their own trap, the Guaidó, like politics in which they got into.
And now let's move on to other topics. In El Salvador, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal and some of the members of the voting boards will participate on Sunday, January 28th, in a simulation of the presidential and legislative elections of next February the 4th. On Sunday, 1,505 voting centers will be set up. That is 94% of the 1,595 that will actually be on election day. And in each voting center, a voting receiving board will be set up, each of one made up of 5 proprietary members and 5 substitutes. More than 5 million Salvadorans are invited to participate next Sunday, February the 4th, starting at 7 a.m. in the election of the president who will govern in the 2024-2029 quinquennium and of 60 deputies of the Legislative Assembly for the 2024-2027 period. In Colombia, the government of Gustavo Petro carried out a strategic territorial mission of the national drug policy of the Pacific Coast. The event took place in the Colombian municipality of Tumaco of the framework of the government with the people public policy, a strategy aimed at taking young people away from drug trafficking networks, preventing and attending to their consumption and promoting rural security and the disruption of drug trafficking structures. The Minister of Justice and Law, Néstor Osuna, said that the strategy shows the government's union for the implementation of a drug policy to create a real and sustainable change in the communities. And in Colombia, the Investigation and Accusation Unit began its second intervention at the cemetery in Turbo in search of more so-called false positives. This agency, attached to the Special Peace Jurisdiction, the JEP, complies with the precautionary measures ordered by the Section of Absence of Recognition. They are deployed in view of the possible presence of bodies of victims of the conflict. The information that ordered this search came from a victim who facilitated the location of the possible graves. Previously, in a first intervention, the JAP recovered in the area 2 bodies presumed to be victims of forced disappearance, which are currently under study by Medellin Forensic Medicine. Now we have a second short break coming up, but before, we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Welcome back to From the South. In France, the main farmers' union won a series of concessions from the government on Friday after blocking major access routes to Paris in protests focused on wages, taxes and regulations. Facing his first major crisis as Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal announced the measures while visiting a livestock farm in the Haut-Garonne department in the southwest of the country, the scene of the first highway blockades. Attal declared that the government will put an end to the rise in the price of diesel used for farm machinery. There will also be an emergency fund to help farmers fight diseases in their livestock. The siege of Paris followed days of disruption on the highways, as well as convoys of tractors through the main cities and protests in front of the government buildings. The rallies mobilized some 55,000 people.
Over the next 3 weeks, we're launching a month of simplification throughout France, as in this department, prefects will bring together our farmers and their representatives to look at what can be simplified, prefecture by prefecture, standard by standard. At national level, we're going to continue to work with the government and representatives of the farming community to see how we can simplify day-to-day administration, taxation, and the mutualized social agricole, the French agricultural welfare system, as much as possible, with French Agriculture Minister Marc Fesneau's bill on agricultural guidance in mind. And to prove to you that I'm motivated to see this work bear fruit, I'm starting today and I've decided on 10 immediate simplification measures, most of which are introduced by decree starting tomorrow.
À partir de demain.
On Saturday in Baghdad, Iraq, and the United States held a first round of talks on the future of American and other foreign troops in the country. Prime Minister of Al Sudani Foreign Affairs advisor said that the talks and whatever progress made with the U.S. will determine the length of these negotiations. For Iraq's foreign ministry, the aim will eventually lead to formulating a specific, clear timeline and to begin the gradual reduction of its coalition's advisors on Iraqi soil. The talks, which have been planned for months, come at a time of heightened tensions in Iraq and the region linked to the war between Israel and Hamas, which has sparked a surge in attacks on American and other coalition forces. And in this context, the Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Sines stated that the military commission meeting will not address the withdrawal of the U.S. forces in Iraq.
Let me be clear. The HMC meeting is not a negotiation about the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq. The United States and the coalition are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government to fight ISIS. Our Iraqi partners have assured us of their commitment towards working together to shape this future on U.S. military presence and the enduring defeat of ISIS. The HMC will enable the transition to an enduring bilateral security partnership between the U.S. and Iraq, building on the successes of the de-ISIS campaign in partnership with the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve.
And the Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of shooting down the plane with U.S. or French missiles. According to the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, the Ukrainian military intelligence agency, the GUR, knew that there were prisoners of war aboard the Russian military transport plane that was shot down by Kiev forces. The mandatory also said that the full story of the downing will become clear in a couple of days. The IL-76 military transport plane was shot down on Wednesday morning over Russia's Belgorod region. All the people on board were killed, 65 prisoners, 6 crew members, and the 3 Russian soldiers. The Russian Defense Ministry says the plane was shot down by Ukrainian anti-aircraft missiles while en route to a prisoner exchange in the town of Belgorod, located near the Russian-Ukrainian border.
Во-первых, потому что были зафиксированы пуски двух ракет.
2 missile launches were recorded from the territory controlled by the Kyiv regime at 11:10.
В 11 часов 10 минут.
The aircraft was hit 2-3 minutes later.
Летательного аппарата произошло через.
It was almost impossible to react.
Отреагировать было практически невозможно. И вот последний инцидент тоже.
These are the latest crimes related to the destruction of aircraft.
С уничтожением самолета.
Every time it involves their citizens, they don't hit soldiers. Well, our only condolences are for our pilots. I will ask the investigative committee to make public as much as possible all the circumstances of this crime so that people in Ukraine know what really happened. Well, we are working on every fact. Investigative bodies are working and building up the evidence.
And Burkina Faso received on Friday 25,000 tons of free wheat promised by President Vladimir Putin as part of a package of 6 African nations. The grain had been pledged by Putin at a Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg last July, with Mali, the Central African Republic, Eritrea, Somalia, and Zambia making up the group. Burkina Faso's Minister for Solidarity and Humanitarian Action, Nandi Diallo, said that the wheat showed Moscow's willingness to accompany the efforts of the authorities in Ouagadougou, who face a security crisis. Russian Ambassador Alexei Saltykov said the wheat was a strong signal of the willingness of the Russian president to give dynamic impetus to cooperation with Burkina Faso, one of his strategic partners on the African continent.
Quantities of wheat were also delivered to Eritrea, Mali, the Central African Republic, Somalia, and Zimbabwe. In 2023, Mali was supplied with cereals, fuel, and fertilizer as humanitarian aid. Our country will continue to contribute not only to supplying Burkina Faso with basic necessities, but also to its self-sufficiency in food, energy, and technology through the transfer of our expertise, skills, and know-how.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on our social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English and with joy, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.